Great.
Hi, folks, and welcome back to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, featuring distinctly qualified global change makers that are dedicated to creating a healthier planet, one where diversity is lived, expressed, and celebrated. My name is Julian Guderley. I'm committed to a world that allows people from all walks of life to thrive. Today's episode is part of the Design Science Studio series, a collaboration with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and my guest is Amber Peoples. Welcome, Amber.
Hello. So glad to be here, Julian.
Yeah, I'm going to share a little bit more about you, Amber, because, you deserve a bio. Your inner 5-year-old is dancing. Oh, no, can't adapt it because you wrote it this way. I'm going to have to cut this out. Amber People's inner 5-year-old dancing farm girl teams up with her adult social entrepreneur to amplify curiosity and engage the senses while prioritizing environment, art, and equity. After a handful of degrees and careers, 2019 saw her teaming up with the tourism industry to create a 10-day, 135-mile celebration of food, art, and place called Life Culture Coast. In 2020, Amber dove into Copy Accelerator Mastermind and is a participant of the Design Science Decade. So to be on her journey to manifest movies that make movements. Now, here we are together in 2021, and Climate of Awe Arts with Ecology is ready to roll in like a wave. With these words, welcome Amber and share about this wave that is rolling in through your life.
The wave, yes. Thank you. It is, a project that's actually been on the back burner since 2018. Starting in 2017, I asked myself really deeply, what does it look like when arts and ecology come together? And at first, I was astounded. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it's a great idea, but can I turn that into something I can do? And so I spent a lot of time researching. I had a lot of fascinating conversations. And then in 2018, I came across many things, but one of them included an amazing teaching opportunity called Movie Maker Academy. And through that, I learned this process to take a documentary and share it with the world open and freely, and then also provide an opportunity for people to give back and the whole mechanics around that and the distribution process around that. And I put that in my back pocket because it wasn't something that was my first set of skill sets. I have a lot of different ones from the handful of careers and degrees I've had. But the one that was most to the forefront at that time was the fact that I'm a live event producer. And so I moved into things like doing something called Science on Tap and farmers markets and creating and founding Live Culture Coast, which was this truly amazing experience on the Southern Oregon coast with the Tourism Commission. And then as the pandemic hit, pretty much from day one, in fact, I was working at a theater project when the state of Oregon, which is where I live, began to close down large events. And I was working on, this huge event at a 3,000 seat theater. And so of course we were immediately closed. And from day one, I was like, this is the time. If ever there was a time, this is the time to dive into everything I need to know to bring forth this vision of Climate of Awe Arts with Ecology. And so that's the wave. That is why I joined the Copy Accelerator Mastermind, is to dive deeply into this form of sharing a message and distributing it to as many people as possible. And then also why I joined the Design Science Studio as the first part of the cohort, you and I together in this first cohort, and so excited to really dive into the mindset that I want to capture within the film itself. And so it's been a beautiful combination of learning those things side by side during this time.
This is super exciting, Amber. I love, to have this interview with you kind of halfway into the process of making a film with so much intention and so much understanding for the complexity of literally any artistic process, really, but specifically, your movie project. Can you unpack this a little bit more and just give us some of the steps that you've already gone through and where you're at with it right now, and how it's really worth the journey rather than just getting to a final product?
That's a great question. And I will say that it was definitely a light bulb moment for me when I was working on some of the beginning steps, which was how, even though I see this movie launching to the world in about 5 years, that every step before that is something that is basically a proof of concept of a proof of concept of a proof of concept ad nauseum. Kind of like we learned about prototyping being such an important thing for any kind of design. And in this instance, for the film, the design of the film, it is about prototyping these proof of concepts. So where I'm starting right now and what I'm launching, here in March of 2021 is just a couple tiny little things. One is called a quiz funnel. And basically with that, the goal is to reach out to people. You have kind of what is referred to as a hook to get people interested in it. And I'm actually in the process of playing with what's the best way to do that. I have 4 that I think are all really good, but they're also going to attract different people. And so I'm curious, do I need to hone in on one that will get the type of person that will really be curious about this film and find the film as a way to help them translate this world of blending arts and ecology? Because that was also something else that I realized, is that those that already see this blend as self-evident, they are on their way. They're doing amazing things. You and I now know 144 of them through the Design Science Studio and all the great glory that there are. But there's a whole nother circle around us of people going, that's kind of interesting, but I don't really know what it means, and I'm confused, and it doesn't necessarily feel safe to enter because I wouldn't know what to say or what to think or how to do it. And so the goal is how do I use this little thing, this quiz funnel, to get those people to capture that curiosity? Because for me, that is a
Right, because
huge
they're
part.
already close in in proximity. This goes for
Yes.
any topic really. There's always the ones at the core circle that are like speaking the language, getting the
Mhm.
thing, they're vibing, they're dancing together. But then there's many people around that are close on watchers or interested, and they kind of need like a bridge, an invitation, or a form of translation that allows for that connection again.
Exactly, that translation. I love that you said that word. I think an important aspect to it. And so this quiz funnel is basically a mini experience, a mini live event, a mini design process to take people through like a 60-second journey. And at the end, give them this little brief moment of self-discovery that hopefully leads them to the next step that I will help serve them with through things like email and through stories, and eventually hopefully take them to this point where of all these different proof of concepts, people will join me on that journey. And by the time the film launches, that this little circle that we have has become a much broader circle because more voices, more people are experimenting, more people are excited, and we're building that energy and that momentum and that curiosity.
Yeah, I think curiosity is a one of those topics I've been having my finger on, or like my curiosity was exploring this idea of curiosity for the last years through this podcast as well. Because when we talk to each other's curiosity, we're actually allowing each other to become learners in real time.
Mm.
And when more people do this, I believe this world that is accessible for all of life and can be lived in equity and equality actually only becomes possible when we're at this level of curiosity. We often say childlike to that in English.
Mm.
It's like, oh, it's like
Mhm.
childlike.
Mhm.
Well, really, we're talking about a mature and developed sense of curiosity that allows us to be real and honest and direct in real time with ourselves, to understand this is who I am and this is what I'm excited about or what I would love to explore more about. And movies, coming back to your project,
Mhm.
movies fulfill that in us in a certain way, because it's a very safe way to connect with something you might not fully be a yes to yet, but you want to watch another romance because you want to like feel that feeling, or you want to watch a documentary because you're curious to learn about a certain aspect or practice.
Yes, I love that. And in fact, one of the greatest experiences I had working in 2019 on Live Culture Coast was I was working with an area that's been struggling for at least 40 years economically. They've been in a recession. It's a very secluded area of Oregon, and so a lot of concepts that I was sharing were brand new to people. Like, for example, the word experience. As an event producer, that is something that's almost overused at this point. Like, even Airbnb has experiences. But for the people I was working with, this was a brand new concept. So I really had to figure out, how do I
Mm.
boil this down to its essence so that I can just keep saying it and keep creating a consistent thing, because I was, going over 135 miles of space and time and land and people and towns. Um, and what I came up with was two things. And one was spark curiosity and engage the five senses. And that resonated with people. It was a key translation for them as to how to both, how to create an experience for other people. In fact, when you were talking about and defining curiosity just now yourself, I love that you talked about it as a mature and developed sense, just like our five senses. It's another sense. And I love that you made that connection.
Well, yeah, I mean, to riff on that a little bit, because it is a really good kind of curiosity to explore, is this understanding of curiosity itself as a
Yeah.
role in our evolutionary path. And so, to riff on this a little bit, I think curiosity is in itself a translator of our soul's blueprint or inner source understanding and wisdom to the outer world. So, if we're desiring a world that works for everyone, we're not actually looking for a template or a system that works for everyone, because guess what? It's going to be a pretty hard pursuit. Good luck if that's what you're wanting to find. But I think much more so, we're looking for everyone to come, metaphorically speaking, online into a co-creative or participatory state. Because when everyone's participating as who they truly are, a whole new level of diversity being expressed and lived, and uniqueness, and everyone being different, suddenly becomes normal, and the kind of the paradise and the utopia that planet Earth can be. And so I think the connection to that is curiosity on your inside, not the curiosity to things that you've been shown and projected, like in a extremely consumerist or capitalist society that we do live in. Nothing wrong with those things as like stages of what we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's in an extreme, people desire what's outside of them rather than coming from what's internally curious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the big shift that's really
Mm-hmm.
happening if we talk about evolution or awakening, or however we want to call this. And I believe curiosity, coming back to the point here, is a translator on our inside for that. Because when we, I'm going to go one further. If we meet curiosity with the resilience of life experience, where those two circles overlap, that's where self-love happens.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I'm finding myself wanting to write that down.
I'll make a meme
Curiosity
of
and
it after this
resilience.
podcast. But hey, Amber, I
Excellent.
want to know more about your participation in the
Yes,
Design Science
yes,
Studio. Um,
please.
so, how
So
did
how I
you
can,
hear of the Design Science Studio? Yeah, go for it.
well, as I was focused after, starting in March of 2020 on Climate of Awe, the whole premise, the storyline is really pretty basic. There's the mythical storyline that is used over and over and over, which is the odd couple story. Uh, you know, in modern Western culture, we've taken scientists and artists and put them on very different ends of the spectrum. And for me, I want to bring them together. And the film itself is basically, I want to find the perfect location, a location that these 8 people can be on for 30 days. And 4 of them are scientists, 4 of them are artists, and they're matched up like odd couples. And working together on 4 different projects that are based somehow on that location, in an effort to blend arts and ecology. And that came, out of this searching that I had been doing for a couple of years about finding that blend and wanting to basically put these 8 people together and then follow them around with cameras to see how does it actually happen? Not just the perfect product at the end that we see as something to hold up and say, this is how you do it, but really it's not how you do it because it's a finished product. How do you show the mess and the joy and the laughter and the confusion and the conflict and the successes and all the messy in between, because that's where we live. And so as I was putting out feelers for how do I do that? How do I show that? That is when Design Science Studio fell across my path. I was actually, the precise way that it fell across was I was watching some kind of, when festivals were translating to online, it was Memorial Weekend of last year. And I think it was Burners Without Borders either did a whole festival or they did a section of a festival. And that's where they were talking about Design Science Studio. And I was so curious. I was like, what would that look like? And does that fit what I'm doing? Because I'm not really building something architectural per se. And that's what it sounded like at the time for me. But I kept, I reached out to some of the people involved and just kind of kept it on the radar, and then saw the application came out. And I was like, well, I guess I don't have to decide if this fits. I'll just put it in and let them decide. And they decided that it did, which was such a fortunate thing for me, because then I entered this world with this amazing cohort of thinkers and creators and innovators, and was just immersed in this mindset of a place that is so unique, because this combination, this how of the blending of arts and science within this community is viewed as self-evident, which is such a unique place, because I don't think I have been anywhere else where that's true. It's always a question as to
powerful
how.
observation. Yeah, very powerful observation. That the saying that we are like the 5 people we spend most time with, there might be pieces of it that are true and pieces that are not, but we definitely live in osmosis and reaction and or in a mirror with all the other people around us. And so having a cohort of people where this is a lived truth, that arts and science are meant to meet, and actually they do meet on an individual expressive way, like they did for people from Da Vinci to Socrates. They haven't quite met yet on our external world's lens of how we interpret science, because of how science is reductionist and dogmatic to its kind of connection to the human ego. And so being around this energy over and over again, where this is just already integrated and normalized, suddenly everything becomes possible.
I love that. Exactly. And this normalization, as you described it, and this sense of self-evident is the word that I keep coming back to, has been really incredible, especially because one of the amazing gifts of this first cohort have been all of these guests that they have invited in to chat with us, to share ideas that, some of them go back to actually having had experiences directly with Buckminster Fuller himself, and they share this really interesting, almost esoteric view of how Bucky came up with what he did, and things like synergistics and world building, to more and more people that are living it day in and day out, whether that is in a museum or an institute or in an animation studio, or all these other incredible places, and to hear how, with their unique vision and their unique view of the world, because some of them, even though they see it as self-evident, they have a tendency towards one aspect or another. For example, one, he works with technology companies, and so his brain has that gear towards the scientific, and so he gave us incredible insight into prototyping, which is part of what helped me come up with the that ongoing proof of concept way that I'm now thinking about climate of awe. And so even though he was talking about, I think he was talking about like VR or AR glasses, it totally helped me rethink my project in a holistic systems way of thinking. And then people that maybe were more, where there's an easier connection to make with the documentary process, such as somebody who was talking about visioning and futurism. We had some amazing guests talk about those topics. Because with the film, you are creating a vision for people to see. And you're almost, in the way that I'm doing my film, it's almost a little bit of a, can you see your future self in these 8 people somewhere? And so there seems an easy connection there, but the way that they presented it gave me a whole nother way of insight and layers to the film that just would have been missing without this amazing opportunity to be and interact with this cohort and these guests.
I love that you're in different cohorts at the same time that allow you to, ultimately incubate and live more of you and your purpose of being you in the world. And at the same time, the synchronicities are pretty stacked here because you're in a cross-disciplinary incubator like the Design Science Studio. And that is really what the Design Science Studio is. It is a kind of a nexus point of cross-disciplinary artists and creators. But then at the same time, this is what we want for ourselves in our own world. It's not about finding the best tribe or the best community. It's about finding the ones that fit to you, right? So for you listening that is thinking about applying to one of the next Design Science cohorts, if you're listening to this, like, in 2021 or in 2026, it really doesn't matter, right? We're literally talking to the future from our perspective here. But as you're listening, like, this is the big question. What are all the different groups that allow you to expand more of you into the world? Because as you walk to realize who you are, the world receives your gift.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And it actually makes me think of a term that was shared by guests that talked about traditional ecological knowledge. And even though a lot of the focus of that it's not just traditional, it's also modern. Like, there's active things happening with these systems of thought and ways of being. But at the core, there is a phrase that has been around for millennia that influences it, which is all my relations. That connection, that sense of relationship with all that is, even what maybe seems contradictory. And I think that's really exemplar in the fact that not only am I in Design Study and Studio, this amazing cohort, I'm in something that they wouldn't even refer to themselves as a cohort. They give themselves a very fancy title called a mastermind. And the fact that community is a part of that is something that's just dawning on them. They're just starting to realize that that's a valuable part of people coming together for this topic, which I find fascinating, because with DSS, that's something we started with. But for this group, they had to come to that. And that is, a mastermind that's all about a very particular type of writing and marketing to get a message out. What's interesting is I actually find that a lot of people don't know this word. And so I find myself explaining it a lot. So I'll do it really briefly here, which is copywriting. And I'm not talking about protecting intellectual property like a lot of people assume, but it's actually a type of writing that ignites something in someone to get them to act, is at the core what it is. And there's
usually
many
only
ways.
People who are connected to digital marketing or marketing in general know really well about copywriting. But I love that you're making that distinction. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And this mastermind focuses specifically on digital marketing and using language to generate fast and furious income. And that's a focus of a lot of people in there. And I'm quite the outlier in the fact that I'm strategizing constantly. How do I use those techniques and translate them to getting this message out about the power of arts and ecology?
I just made a note, like copywriting for movie making. It's
Yes.
very interesting how you're putting this together. And so I'm going to really, I want to acknowledge it. So I'm going to just point at it one more time. Like, being a cross-disciplinary thinker becomes real when you're embodying it in the way you live. And so Amber is just giving us an example of that, right? Like, you're using a skill set that most people understand as a marketing tool to apply the same skill set, but ultimately to take its core intention, which is just to engage and motivate someone to take action, for what serves your project and your art and your visionary eye as a movie maker. And so you're literally applying something across disciplines to serve another discipline. Um, Fascinating, because it's really how, well, for one, I think we're personally excited to create when these things happen, right? Then we're at our own kind of cutting edge experience of consciousness. But at the same time, it's fascinating because the reason why many people cannot imagine a world that works for everyone yet is because we're used to perceiving the world in silos. But only when we start mixing and translating and bridging from the different silos and the different cultural patterns, we start kind of emerging to see this new possibility, which I can't wait for this movie. Maybe tell us a little bit more about this timeline also, because
Mhm.
we know people are going to listen to this, possibly in the future just
Mhm.
as much as now, because really the Design Science Studio is a movement for a whole decade. And so I want to know about the timeline of your movie and where into the decade it fits.
Yeah, well, I think it's really appropriate that I came in on this first cohort, which focuses on, if I remember right, it's commitment and reconciliation is the kind of the theme of DSS during this first cohort and the second cohort. And I think that sense of commitment is really true to this sense of timeline. Is there was a deep dive of commitment into these transdisciplinary processes, and which is making me just ready, just as we're about to celebrate the end of the first cohort, to put out not even a complete quiz funnel, but a prototype. And I've asked to do a live session where my hope is to engage people to say, this is the first draft, give me your input. Tell me what hooks you, tell me what distracts you, what confuses you, what gets you curious in the best way possible. And so just unrolling that to begin with is step number one. And I'm even going to put it on a website, which will be climateofawe.com, that will have zero branding. It'll literally have the hook and a push button to take the quiz. And I don't have my colors figured out, my fonts, none of that yet. But it'll happen. That will be the next step in the next year. And getting that foundation of building community from the beginning, I think, is step one in my timeline, and this first year. And the ultimate next big iteration within that community is finding one artist and one scientist working together and to do a short documentary, like a 10-minute one, and test out all of these theories that I have in my head about how this could work, and what it would take to film it, and what it would be like for the artist and the scientist to work together with cameras watching them, and putting it all together, and then test that as a proof of concept. Get that out to people. Try taking it to film festivals. See how people respond to it. Do other artists and scientists go, oh, I want to do that? Do big locations that I would need to be able to do this go, this would be the perfect place for us to see this manifest? Do I get crowdfunding opportunities to be able to afford this? Because quite frankly, the cost of doing this larger documentary is close to $1 million. It is not a small feat at all. I mean, if you're looking at like big blockbuster movies, $1 million is small. But compared to an independent documentary, it's quite a bit. And so there will be the sense too that hopefully that small documentary can be this massive move towards proving the concept that will allow for the fruition of the larger one. And also during that time of collecting resources is putting it out to the world of applications and opportunities to be involved. Because I know for a fact that wherever we locate the film, this will bring a lot of attention to that location. So I want to choose that location carefully. For example, even though it may be perfect to do it on some kind of land trust for those 8 people, it may not be good for me to market that land trust, because a bunch of people might flood to it and kind of cause problems within what the goal of that land trust is ecologically. And so finding that perfect location that can house and support those 8 people, as well as benefit from the attention that the film will bring, is a really interesting balance. And so that's why I think 5 years is the right timeline to go at the pace of nature in regards to how it all has to unfold.
Beautiful. I love getting a bit more detail there about your project and how that's currently, looking and being digested and then being, generated out again. Amber, this has been very insightful already. And I have a question for you here that goes along this timeline conversation and the speed of nature even further. And you were talking about a multi-generational perspective a little earlier. And so if you were to zoom out for 7 generations and seeing yourself as an ancestor of the future, what is your dream or your spirits or souls or your heart's, kind of prayer for these future generations, or for us now, in the sense that what kind of ancestors can we be for that future generation to be on a thriving planet?
What a great question. And I find myself jumping to the year 2175. And the first thing that comes to mind is my greatest prayer, my greatest hope is that people are still walking on the planet barefoot. There are still places to do that. That connection is still valuable. That connection is refound for some people. And from that place of grounding with bare feet on the earth, what is being created? What innovations, what human designs, what relationships with the natural world, what art, what food is being regenerated. I think that's one of the biggest gifts actually that Design Science Studio gave me, is a definition of life, which is regeneration. The ability to regenerate, when so many of our current human systems are about generating, which is exhausting because of the constant fuel source it has to have. But if we can find a way to regenerate and put that into our human systems, that to me would be the most amazing prayer to see come true.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. It's so fundamental that we as humanity harmonize with the regenerative principle of life. It's a beautiful vision, and thank you for just going there, with your eyes closed. I was reacting happily, dancing with my hands here when you said people barefoot on the planet. This very much resonates with my heart, and it is a beautiful way of how we connect as humans to the planet. Is this, direct, embodied way, rather than losing ourselves in our minds only. So, Amber, I'm so glad for this conversation we're having. I want to, throw it back to you and just hear anything else you want to share about your project, or a call to action to people as they're watching this, or any other insights on the Design Science Studio. Just feel free.
Yeah, great question. Well, I would say, of course, when the website is up and running, whether it is just a quiz funnel button or something that is showing you the progress of the next 5 years, please hop on that, which is climateofawe.com, and that is AWE, which stands for Arts with Ecology, but also that sense of awe that I think is part of regeneration. And perhaps that is actually the call to action, is this sense of we talked a lot about curiosity. And I think part of that continuum of curiosity is awe. To be in a place where we find something so curious that we're in awe of it is this amazing place. And it's not always the place that we're at, because we're human and we go through the full range of emotions. But as we have been focusing on Buckminster Fuller for these last few months, and what he's described as this Leonardo type, it is in this place of incessant curiosity, which when you continue to go in that infinite realm, does give you these amazing moments of awe, which can be as grounded as being barefoot on the grass, or coming up with a design that completely changes how we interact as humans on this planet.
That's a deep one. I'm going to let that sink in too. Talking about humans on this planet, what would be like 3 favorite places of yours in the world that,
Oh my goodness.
you can just share with us?
Yeah, I've been blessed with seeing so many, and hope to experience even many more. But from my youth, which granted I was 20 at the time, so count youth as you may. I'm 44 now and proud of every year I've lived. But I had an amazing opportunity a summer in between college years to work in this area of northern Minnesota called the Boundary Waters, which is this protected wilderness area that there's part of it in Canada and part of it in the United States, and that's the term boundary. And it is this incredible area of all these tiny, tiny lakes that you can portage in between and travel and canoe through and kayak through. And just getting to spend 3 months there and work for an outfitters was so incredible. Highly recommend.
Wow.
Another one that was a kind of just an important milestone moment, and the nature reflected that for me, was a journey that I got to go through for 10 days through the Steen Mountains, Steene. And those are here in Oregon, and they are in a very small population area in southeastern Oregon. But what was kind of interesting about that was, coming from Minnesota, growing up in Minnesota, I had a very particular way of understanding how glaciers affected the land, because they very dynamically affected Minnesota, but in one particular way. And when I realized the Steen Mountains were also carved by glaciers, and they are totally a different landscape, there was something about traveling through that area with that in mind that was exquisite. And then the final one that I will say is, I had the amazing opportunity in 2016, to work at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the largest arts festival in the world, and it's focused on theater and stand-up comedy. And I ran a 750-seat theater, and we did 5 to 7 shows a day. It was bonkers in all the most amazing ways possible. And it was constant for 6 weeks. And part of the reason, besides career-wise as an event producer, why that was so fabulous was, I also have quite a substantial amount of my ancestry that comes from Scotland. And so afterwards, I got to travel for 3 weeks to places where my ancestors walked and stepped and were named from as a result. And that connection with the land in a whole nother way that I hadn't ever experienced before was profound.
Beautiful. I love that you just took us on a little world tour there through meaningful places in your journey. So many, there's so many insights when we hear how people kind of get to move across the planet, or how they relate with their home places, and just beautiful. Amber, I have a closing question for you, and that's again about the Design Science Studio. And so, more like a call to action for everyone who's coming into the future cohorts. Like, what do you have to say to future cohorts?
Oh, great question. I would say, find a balance between absorbing all the amazingness that is, whether it's guests, whether it is your fellow cohort members, whether it's new ideas, and then put it into action. Save yourself time, give yourself time, space in your world to not only absorb all that, but then reach out to people that you are meeting. Take the ideas that are these nuggets and practice them. You're not going to do them perfect at first, but take a little kernel. Like one kernel that was given to us was an animator, Dave Zabowski, talked about plussing things. So in an iterative process, in a creative process, especially if it's a really big thing that you're working on, how do you plus it in little measurable ways? And so how do you take that idea, not just absorb it and hear it, but then try it out in your life for the next week? And then if it sticks, for longer. And so that's would be my two biggest recommendations. Take it in, absorb it, and then put it into action.
Powerful. Yeah. I'm gonna plus this in my life and do more of the things I'm absorbing and making space for that. Amber, thank you so much for this interview. I had a great time with you, and I'm can't wait to share this episode.
Oh, thank you so much. Delightful to chat with you, and I look forward to continuing the journey together.